So the Gavin Newsom recall election is approaching very quickly. It is going to be basically next week. And so we thought we'd come back and relist all of the reasons why a lot of people want him recalled so you can make your own educated decision on if you think that he should be voted out or not. So we're just gonna quickly go down the list and then we're gonna go in depth about the list. So starting off, Covert Hypocrisy, the zero bail policy during COVID, taxes, prison reform, the environmental effects of his policies and policies he chose not to create, job loss, population loss, and also the COVID giveaway that he had. So I'm gonna go back down the list and we're gonna start with Covert Hypocrisy so you guys can kind of understand what we're saying. And Gavin Newsom was a complete hypocrite when it came to all of his policies and how he treated the citizens of California. I mean,
There are basically rules for thee, not for me.
exactly. And he basically he put his kids back in private school, but kept, public schools closed. He closed businesses, kept his open. He was caught multiple times violating his own stay-at-home orders. I mean,
to make it worse, when he addressed it, he was like smiling and laughing like a fucking maniac or some shit.
exactly. And then, he allowed movie studios to, go out and continue filming in California. But he was like, hey, if you want to go get your ramen, you're in trouble. You're getting ticketed. Your business is getting ticketed. You're getting fined. So that's one of the main reasons a lot of people didn't like him was because of COVID. But continuing on, I mean, the zero bail policy during COVID, if you don't know anything about the zero bail policy, it was anybody who committed basically misdemeanors. Felons obviously were not a part of this, but misdemeanors got immediately let out of jail. They basically got arrested, processed, court date given to them, and they got let out of jail. And multiple police officers were pissed off about this because they're like, hey, we keep seeing the same dude doing the same thing after we let him out, and we can't even hold him because of the zero bail policy. Now it was, to combat, COVID in jails, but a lot more people, citizens and police officers were pissed off like, hey, you can't just continue to let these people back out on the streets and continue to do these crimes over and over again.
Right. I mean, and even then, that's still to combat COVID in jails. Doesn't make sense because he also just let out a bunch of people from the jails who had COVID. But it's like you're not really battling. You if anything, you're gonna let that shit spread faster. But if you have people keep committing the same crime over and over again, and they face no real punishment, they can commit that same crime over and over and over again until they face that court date.
Exactly.
There's no guarantee they're even going to show up for that court date. Now you have a warrant. Now you make this whole process more difficult and more stressful. And at the end of the day, it's just going to cost you more tax dollars.
Exactly. And like an example of this is, it's not a felony to cut someone's muffler off their car, which is a big thing in California, And so we saw people going out and doing, muffler theft or the catalytic converter theft. And then they just go back out and they do the same thing because it's a super small charge, but they can make a ton of money off of it. So they're like, okay, it sucks. Like, I'm going
to do that to my neighbor's car. Exactly. We saw him. We were like, the fuck are you doing over here?
Continuing down the list, another thing was taxes. California, has one of the highest gas taxes in the country. And he raised the gas tax again to like 51.3, I think. It'll be on screen. And again, this combined with the federal gas tax, it brings it to around like almost $1 of when you go to fill up gas, almost $1 is going to the government basically, which is why gas in California is almost $5 in some areas and like well over $4.30 in some areas. And the only people that really affects are low-income people and like middle-class Americans. I mean, the rich people don't really care. They're like, okay, my gas is a little bit more expensive, but the struggling single parent, the mom and dad that are struggling, to put food on the table for the family, now you just raise the tax on them for something that they need to get to work, to, take their kids to school, and, you're making it more inconvenient for them. And then on top of that, he's in general raising taxes on, businesses, income tax. He wants to raise income tax on, wealthy Americans. He wants to raise income tax on middle-class Americans like Biden. And so a lot of people are, again, annoyed with Newsom about his tax laws, especially when he was boasting, surplus of $75.5 billion. It's like, why would you continue to overtax us when you have a bunch of money that you're not even using to help them, the citizens?
I mean, you said it all, right? There's already $75 billion in surplus, and they're doing nothing to fix infrastructure, nothing to fix the energy crisis, like the rolling blackouts, nothing to fix not even considering to do nuclear power plants, not trying to reform education to make it easier and better and more understandable for kids. And then he's just going to go, to fix all those problems, you're going to raise the taxes and you're not going to say anything or not even going to question it.
Exactly. It's like the definition of like greedy government overspending. Like they keep getting more and more money and they're not solving any issues. And Californians are just like, well, the next guy, I guess, will be the person, I guess it'll be the next guy. He'll finally do something about homelessness and crime and education. It's like they have so much money, it's insane. But to continue down the list, prison reform was another thing that Newsom got knocked for. He was letting 76,000 inmates, 26,000 of whom were violent offenders, get good behavior credits to get out early. Now, this does absolutely nothing. This is not justice reform at all. Just basically saying you can do this small thing and get a credit and get out early is not justice reform. It's not helping them actually get reformed when they come back out on the streets. So a lot of people were pissed about that. Another thing was he had a policy that allowed transgenders, or quote unquote transgenders, because the policy basically said ask everyone if they're a transgender or not. And if they say yes, they're going to go be housed in a women's facility. And now there's a case of a female pregnancy, and now the jails are handing out, birth control and condoms because of this in a facility where you're not even supposed to be having sex in general. So all these things right here are another reason why Newsom's getting knocked, because his prison reform isn't prison reform, and all it's doing is just allowing rapes in female prisons and letting criminals get out and get off early for good behavior.
When it comes to just anything in general, Newsom doesn't know what he's doing, especially when it comes to actual prison reform, because instead of trying to get people off the streets and get away from the criminal lifestyle, he just makes it easier for them to get more entrenched in it.
Exactly, and there's no actual reform.
No, there's no
reform.
There's no process for trying to get people to understand what they're doing is right or wrong, or trying to help them get back on their feet. No, it's just, get back onto the streets.
And or forcing, prisoners to be like, hey, you don't have a high school degree, you're getting one. Hey, you don't have any job experience, you don't know how to get a job. Okay, here's how we can help you when you get out of prison. They don't do any of that.
No.
But to continue down the list is the environmental issues that Newsom has neglected and not really considered. So one of them was the last major nuclear facility in California is closing soon. And because of that, we're going to have to increase our use of fossil fuels and fossil fuel plants to basically keep up with the energy strain on California.
But he expects everyone to get away from diesel by 2030?
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, especially because we already have rolling blackouts here in California because of the power usage. Now everyone's already switching to electric cars. Tesla's a huge market. Audi's a huge market here for electric cars. And we're already going to see a more strain, like a larger strain on the power grid. And so he basically has no plan. He's just saying, hey, get rid of diesel, get rid of gas, no more new gas cars by 2030. But hey, we're not going to do anything to actually, facilitate this change and upgrade our infrastructure to actually be allowed, to be able to do this. And so then another thing was the water crisis in California. Parts of California have been in a drought for forever, and now they're starting to cut off water in certain parts of California. But hey, what is Newsom doing about it? Absolutely nothing. Do we have any desalinization plants that are, creating water so these farmers and so the cities don't have, shortages?
Nope.
Is he filling the reservoirs?
Nope.
So again, Newsom's getting knocked for the environmental effects that will happen in the state of California because he's failing to address and he's failing to create good policies when it comes to climate change and when it comes to water and power. Another thing is, it was big news at beginning of this year, which was the job losses and the population decrease. If you don't know anything about this, the census recently happened, and California lost, I believe it was like 100,000 plus residents. It was more than that, but obviously people still moved here during COVID. I don't know why, but they did. And obviously businesses are starting to feel the strain of the taxes.
Businesses were feeling the strain when they were forced to close and thousands of people couldn't make any money and became homeless.
Yeah, and then people lost their jobs and all that. So we've seen a ton of tech companies start to relocate to, Texas, to Arizona, to Nevada. We're seeing people just outright leave because they don't like the policies, they don't like the homelessness, they don't like all the things going on in California. And again, this is just another thing that Newsom is getting knocked for and why he's getting recalled. And lastly, the COVID giveaway. So basically, Newsom gave around a few $100 million worth of COVID incentives to get people to get vaccinated. Instead of using that money towards homelessness, education, crime, infrastructure, he said, why don't we just give away $116 million while I'm getting recalled to just random people? Because that'll definitely make every single person like disregard how they personally feel about the vaccine, and they're definitely going to enter, and we're going to give away all this money, and it's going to do so much good, which it did nothing. But basically, again, this is just another thing that Newsom did that people do not like him for, and they're just like, hey, you're misusing our money, you're causing people to leave the state, you know, you're not doing anything for education, infrastructure, power, water, and all the things that we just listed, and people are just fed up. And so now this is where we are before the recall election. And you should make your own educated decision when it comes to the recall election.
This isn't about a Democrat or Republican thing. This is about him being an absolute failure and just probably even a bad person, maybe even. Who knows? But comment down below what you guys think about the whole recall situation, and tell us who you're going to be voting for, or if you want him to be back in office.